top left.
Oh, there we are.
Cool.
Excellent.
All right, good evening. Welcome to a work session of the Silverton Board of Trustees. It is January 3rd, 2022.
Oh, there we are. Cool. Excellent.
That was weird.
Do you think we have like a 20-second delay?
I just had to pause the video on this side.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, starting over. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to a Silverton Board of Trustees work session on January 3rd, 2022. The time is 7:04 p.m. And I call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Trustee Barilla.
Here.
Trustee Harper.
Here.
Trustee Uyghur.
Here.
Trustee Vieira.
He just popped up. Actually.
There he is.
There he is.
All right.
Trustee Vieira, it's your turn in the roll call.
Hey, Jordan, if you can hear us, we were just doing the roll call and we called you.
Perfect. I'm here. I'm going to leave my video off for the moment.
Great.
Trustee George. Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Here.
And Mayor Furman.
Here. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. Happy New Year. After a nearly 100-inch snowstorm, seems like a pretty appropriate work session discussion we're going to have.
Great. Well, thank you for coming. And staff has prepared an agenda packet for the trustees that include a memo on where we are at in the Kendall Mountain Recreation Area planning process with the grant deadlines, information from the community builders process, and update on current maintenance plans, as well as a draft RFS. So that's a request for services for design. So the RFS is out as an outline that I requested of Todd to put together in order to help us frame our discussion tonight. It's definitely not the final draft, nor are we invested in the wording of the RFS. Our goal was simply to provide you with a skeleton request that you all could give us input for staff to revise and then present again at a meeting to adopt or to put out. So with that, I wanted to open up some discussion on the RFS. If we need to go through the memo, we can do that as well. So either one, whatever you guys feel like would be the most helpful and productive for tonight.
I think that for the purposes of presenting everything to the public that may not have the packet directly in front of them, it would be super helpful to go through the memo first.
Sure thing. And I just lost it from my screen, so let me just pull that up again. All right. And this can all be found on our website as well, on our online documents. So basically we did a little background in our memo explaining that this request for services is based off of a number of plans. So like this, the community master, the town and county master plan, the Animas River Corridor Revitalization Plan, and the Plan of Management and Development for the transfer of title of federal lands administered by the BLM. So all of these adopted plans have referenced Kendall improvements and the recreational potential there. And that's kind of what we base this skeleton RFS on. As far as we do have money for this planning grant. So we have already been awarded grant money through GOCO and DOLA for the purposes of continuing planning efforts at Kendall Mountain Recreation Area. And those are both coming up on deadlines, expiring. So we have DOLA deadline on March 31st, 2022, and the GOCO deadline on July 31st, 2022. So we did a little bit of follow-up from the last meeting that we had talked about deferred maintenance versus capital improvements. So we kind of laid out what we have been planning on doing with deferred maintenance and where we see big spending items in the future. So hopefully the planning isn't focused on the deferred maintenance, more of like planning for our future. That's really where we want to spend that money there. And if you want, I can go into like the finance aspect of both of those. I also included a letter from Clark Anderson, who, when I asked him about, you know, how has Kendall been mentioned or talked about in all his interactions with the community lately, he gave a quick synopsis on it, that it has been mentioned quite a bit, but as far as like their surveys that they've done, they had like 22 specifically during the values phase. But they are still going to be reaching out, so it's definitely not the end of their portion of the engagement. And I included that as an attachment of all the responses so that you all have kind of that reference to look at. And then we presented the request for services. So this draft that staff has come up with for you all to give input on. Does that sound like a good?
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
And so now you're looking for feedback from trustees on this draft.
Yes. So if, you know, if there's areas where we're lacking, if there's areas where we need to be more specific, we really made it kind of vague on purpose so that we could have these discussions and rely on you all for the specifics if we want to dive into those. The cool thing about keeping an RFP a little vague is that you can get responses, or an RFS a little vague, is that you can get responses that you weren't anticipating and might offer more ideas that you weren't even thinking of. So I would stay away from being too specific, but at the same time, if we need to refine some stuff, we can.
Well, great. I know our discussions are a little bit less fluid virtually, but I'll facilitate as best I can. Does anyone want to volunteer thoughts, comments, questions, or should we just go around the table? Molly?
I'll start. I do understand what you meant by intentionally vague, because you can get more when you let people's imaginations run wild. In the background, I guess we're only addressing the quote existing issues or needs in this, rather than, and then the link presents it what the thoughts were before. So I'm wondering if we should use anything at all to kind of segue these two with what the master planning committee had in there for ideas. Are we going, I mean, I know we're throwing them all out, but we don't want to throw all of them out. We just don't want the big, huge ski area. So I wonder if any of the work that they already did, I don't know if there's a link to that as well that could be entered into there. And do we want to call out specific things that need to be addressed? That's my question, because we don't call it out there. We just say it's in the background. This is what we've got. And you go look up the links. So just some thoughts on that. That's where I'm at.
Thank you, Molly.
Todd?
Hey, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to address what Molly just said. I think the intention was, if you read kind of more carefully through the plans that we're providing, those go into pretty good detail as far as the wants and desires of the community, whether it be Nordic skiing or a skating rink or improvements to the river corridor. So I think we were leaning on those documents a little harder to kind of set the parameters of what assets would be developed or potentially developed, or existing assets that would be improved. So I think we were, or when I was writing it, my intention was to leave that out of the RFPs, thinking that those documents would really speak for us, because anyone interested in the RFP would, I at least hope, go through those three planning documents pretty carefully.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So we're not considering putting anything else that the master planning committee had come up with then.
Sure,
We
I
certainly
wanted to
could
speak
at
to
the
that.
direction of the board.
Yeah,
No, but we weren't gonna use like the ski area bit. We were gonna toss all that, but they still had a lot of other great ideas.
Mhm.
great.
Molly, I agree with you. I wondered if the one of the documents that the committee worked really hard on, and I think is fairly comprehensive and could be really good information as just for someone trying to reply to this RFS would be the planning guidelines that the committee generated. So that might be one of those blue, I thought that would make a good addition to the blue links that you have, Todd.
Yeah, if we could all see that again briefly, I'm not opposed to getting rid of all of their work, just the massive amount that they put into having this behemoth of a ski area. But I know a lot of the other work was comprehensive. Thank you, Sally.
I was curious, Molly, is there anything specific that you thought stood out as valuable?
Hang on, I cannot stand this drive, Google, whatever this thing is. I just lost my entire packet. Come back to me, let other people talk while I reboot it.
Sure. Sounds good.
And I am going to send you all the kind of original RFP that went out, that was drafted in February, so that you all have that for your reference as well.
Do either of you
I
have
have
the
it.
planning guidelines close at hand as well that you could share?
Yeah, I think I can get to that. What's the best way?
Guidelines within the RFP or outside of that?
The planning guidelines are outside of the RFP. It was that 16-page document, and I think it's something that the Kendall Committee itself generated versus like the SE group
Okay.
viability study or some of those other things. So I think some of the most helpful work that the committee generated were those planning guidelines are really, I think, a pretty good summary of what the work that went into, that the committee put into just researching and sort of synthesizing. And then I know that we wrote a few memos, and talking and trying to search for this at the same time isn't working, but some of those, maybe there's a memo that has, something more useful than, not all of them, I think, were that useful, but okay, I think I'm getting there.
And I'm not familiar enough with the planning guidelines to know what's in them, so.
The planning guidelines just have a really nice summary quality and are organized in categories of sort of what the town would want to consider before committing to anything, to any sort of improvements at Kendall.
Okay.
Sort of like pre-planning and like in the planning and master planning process, what are some things to highlight, which I think would be really nice guides for anyone responding to the RFS.
Great.
I think I have a draft of them, but I don't have the final version easily at hand.
I can search for that if you guys want to continue discussion and see if I have it on our end.
I can keep looking too.
Cool. Who else has questions, comments, feedback? I just had kind of like a format idea that might be good or bad. It depends what the substance of that. So I was wondering if it might be helpful to either link to or quote or specifically reference the sections of the Animas River Corridor Revitalization Plan, the Plan of Management and Development for the Transfer Title of Federal Lands Administered by the BLM, and the master plan that specifically reference Kendall.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's nice to have whoever responds do all of their homework and read the entirety of the plans, but I also think it might be helpful for people reviewing the RFS and the people responding to have more specific references to at least what we see as the overlapping aspects of those that relate to Kendall.
Yes, I would agree with that statement. It did take a while. You'd have to search the documents that come up when you click on them. It's not hard, but I agree with that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's a great one we can incorporate in.
Because I feel like that's the way that I read the memo is the suggestion is to kind of look at where all of these things overlap and essentially like there's multiple approved plans that reference improvements at Kendall. Plus we date back to 2010 and the visioning that led to the 2010 master plan that looked at improvements of Kendall, and where all those things overlap is what we're really focused on.
Right. Okay.
Nice. Let's see, one comment I wanted to make on, let me get back to the document, Todd, in the bullet, I don't know how we want to, where this would fall in the formatting. And I think I mentioned it in our last work session on Kendall would be some kind of request that whoever responds to this engage in, I'm calling it like the ABC model. So I think to start with, like, this is where, this is what conceptually, it's like a conceptual planning of summer at Kendall, model A, model B, model C. This is conceptually what could happen in the winter, model A, model B, model C, and ultimately leading us to this fused conceptual planning and design for year-round services at Kendall, and just explicitly asking for that, because I think it will give the community a good framework for providing feedback. And I think it will potentially guide the, whoever engages with us on this in their responses to just know, like, this is sort of what this is how we want to, this is how we want to move in the direction of something that we have broad agreement on, and to create some efficiencies.
I hate to ask you to do it, but could you say it again, but different? I didn't.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how to say this. I mean, Todd, you'll probably have a better sense of it, but what I'm trying to say is, looking at the planning response, or looking at an organization to respond to this request, I would like to see in their response a strategy for creating, this is Kendall in the summer. Model A is conceptually looking like this. It has a little bit of trail here, it has a boardwalk there, and it has some signage. Model B is wedding venue and parking improvements here and something else. And maybe it's progressively more expansive and potentially more expensive, but it would be something where it would create a framework that the community could engage with and say, I liked a little bit of A, C seemed like too much. And ultimately, throughout the process of working with the community, the master plan gets to a place of, it's not A, B, or C, it's this new model where there's broad agreement. And we ultimately would want to fuse that with what people look at in the winter ABC, and really directing the responses to be a year-round design plan for Kendall.
So now I understand what you're saying. Do you think, isn't that level of detail part of the actual design plan that comes out as opposed to something that would be included in the application?
Well, I think the specificity of what I'm calling the ABC model could potentially create some efficiencies in the relationships that we build with the organization, so they know exactly what the outcome is that we're looking for. And they don't show up saying, we took a look at Kendall, we have all of the topography mapped, we see what's there, and we'd like to recommend that you look at in this direction. I think it's more of like a recommendation of a strategy approach. And potentially they don't like it, but I think it's important that we just don't start completely from scratch.
Todd, go ahead. I'm struggling to see how to take that direction applied to the RFS. And the analog I was thinking of is like, if we were to use a much simpler idea, like if we were looking for like logo design for the town of Silverton and we were looking for an RFS for a design firm, we would be directing them like, we're going to be looking for certain numbers of rounds of iterations and ideas, and then we'll narrow it down to the ultimate logo. And I think maybe the way to get to what you're saying is to specify like that we will want multiple conceptual plans proposed in the initial phase, and that will eventually narrow it down, and that the cost of all of this needs to include that like multi-round version. But I wasn't sure if that's what you meant, or if you actually wanted like the initial proposal to say like, we will provide these 3 scopes.
No.
Or, okay.
The previous.
Okay.
And I think to add to that, sorry, I lost it. Keep going. Go to Todd.
Todd, and then Molly.
If Trustee Barella would like to speak first, I can
Got it.
defer.
Sure.
Okay, so under services requested, it says conceptual design renderings of all new asset, existing asset, improving non-structural designs to reflect the town's desire to maintain historical integrity where feasible and meet with ADA accessible compliance. So then let's take that and separate those 2 things out. Put your conceptual renderings and your new assets and your improvements in one, and then make a second bullet point that reflects that. So under the conceptual designs and renderings, you can have this multi-stage tiered item.
Yeah, I agree. That's the right spot for it. And I remembered what I was going to say. I think separating out and naming in that bullet point, summer and winter, and moving towards year round.
So you're saying having it broken up seasonally?
Yes.
So is that good enough direction for you, Todd, with the way that one sentence reads, to break it out? And then do some sub bullet points below that. Okay, as long as that's clear direction, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we appreciate all this direction. It's going to be very helpful for Gloria and I. To go back to what Trustee Barney was kind of mentioning, I think that's a bit of a difficult approach in some ways. A lot of this will be driven by what we can realistically afford. You may be saying, okay, we want this one big ticket item and we can get 2 lower ticket items. We want to look comprehensively across everything, but I think a lot of the direction that we're giving to a firm, if we do go that direction and hire one, needs to be pretty specific so they know what they're working on. We can't really have someone come in and tell us what we want. I think we need to give this firm clear direction on what we're expecting of them and what assets we're expecting them to develop. And just as general practice, I think that should really be coming straight from the community and from the trustees. I think it's a little difficult for a consulting firm to come in and say, you tell us what we want. in three different ways. I may be misunderstanding. But for someone to give an A, B, and C of varying assets, we really need to be driving that process of what we want to develop for the community and what the community is telling us they want. If that's, am I understanding that correctly, Trustee Barney?
Sure.
I think there's something in the middle, which is saying like in the RFS proposal and the cost that they're gonna say it, we're gonna, the budget amount that we're gonna need to spend in order to engage them and get the product we want will include up to, 3 rounds of scope iteration, like something like that. Similar to like if we were getting logos, we would specify exactly how many initial logo options they were going to give us and how many iterations of design updates we would get within the base fee. I think that's kind of the thing that hits the goal of what you're talking about, where it's like, we don't just want to say, here's our list of goals and then have them come back with one proposal, take it or leave it, and we just spent some money. I think it's like, we'd like to just ensure that we are paying for multiple conceptual models and iterations before we settle on a final design, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think the reason I'm kind of hammering this a little bit is, so to step back from, I'm not attached to a particular strategy. I think what I'm attached to is a level of specificity that creates clarity between us and an organization that we work with, so that further on down the road, as we're, some of these issues are really easy for us to work on as a community. Some of them are really hard and really controversial. And I just want to create some clarity and be slightly more specific without losing the benefits of the vagueness, so that further down the road, there isn't uncertainty or lack of understanding between us as a community or the municipality and an organization that we're working with, along the lines of like, well, you didn't tell us that. And I just think that because we've gone around and around on a few of these issues, we do have multiple plans listed in the document already. And we have a lot of public input from various, from community builders, from quality of life. We're going to have more community input as we go forward. I think potentially I'm just seeing the possibility of some inefficiency with almost like an overload of information. And the community has said so much about these different aspects that I think Clark even spoke to it in the letter that's in the packet that we have, of like really being able, I want us to be able to work with an organization that can get us to the discussion of exactly what we want to see there versus whatever the controversy is surrounding the idea or of a concept. So I think I'm just pushing for some language along. I think Molly's right. It's in that bullet point about conceptual renderings. I think just breaking that down a little bit more and creating some specificity benefits the community in terms of efficiency, but also in terms of product. And what that looks like, I'm not an expert on that, but I'd like to see a little bit more specificity there, and I'd like to see it separated seasonally. And I'd like to request that we sort of look at season by season and then move towards a year-round master plan and really name that.
I have to be totally honest. I'm like 70% with you and still 30% feeling pretty vague.
That's okay. On what I want to say.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to, like if I were the one that had to make the revisions, I'm not sure I would know how to do what you're asking.
So in that bullet point, I would just draw out that we would have conceptual design renderings of I don't know about this all new asset, existing asset, but all new renderings, conceptual design renderings of winter assets and amenities, summer asset and amenities, with a year-round overall vision.
So like showing how it's gonna look in
Uh-huh.
all of the seasons.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, the Kendall Committee does have something about that too, which I don't know that we want to include, but that just triggered it. And I think ultimately, the reason why I want to say this in the request for services is to say, let's separate those out so we can have more efficient conversations about it. And it's okay, disagree with me. I could be wrong.
I honestly don't have an opinion. I just want to understand what, what the ask is.
Yeah.
Is it more about just the visualization of how it will be utilized in the different seasons?
It is. And the overlaying of those so that, for example, we don't come up with a really awesome fire pit layout that ends up being a really nice location for the parking lot. Or that's not a great example, but I
Like
just.
developing an asset for the winter that prohibits something in the summer, vice
Yes,
versa.
yes.
Okay. Todd, how are you feeling?
I've got clear direction. I've been taking a lot of notes.
He's like,
So I think I understand. I think largely, I would just echo kind of what I said earlier. That's really driven by us. As far as if we want to develop a fire pit area, we can include that detail. Let me take a step back here. The way that I kind of see this process going, as far as the trustees and the community having some control over what this partner or group would be providing back to us, the renderings. It's really driven, the way I see it would be maybe similar to Columbine Park, where we have a preliminary meeting with the trustees, a preliminary meeting with the community. That gives them a basis of something to start conceptualizing. And then we'll have frequent check-ins, similar to what we're doing with the blueprints in Columbine Park, where there's these multiple check-ins where the community and the trustees can both weigh in and say, yeah, this progress is great, continue to run with it, or hold up, we've got some issues or some things we want to rearrange before we go any further. And I included some language in the RFP about that, but I think that's going to be a really critical part of this process, particularly when you're trying to get that community input and really hone in on what specific assets you're developing and where they should go and all of that. But that's kind of what I see this process as doing. If we do this process correctly with a design firm, we should be kind of going through that incrementally. So they wouldn't need 2 or 3 plans. They just need one plan that we're frequently giving them feedback on. It's got to be a really close partnership. So that's kind of where I see the direction of this whole process going. We need someone to come in and facilitate this process and hone in on scope and scale and location, and they'll be the experts at that. And we're just giving them really the framework of the assets we'd like to see. Does that, I'm still a little unclear. I have a lot of notes, but I'm still a little unclear.
Okay, I like the direction you were taking that, Todd. So then rewording that one, conceptual renderings of all new assets and existing non-structural design, okay? And then let that go. And then the town's idea, make that a separate one. And below that one, you're going to put in something that says to the effect of summer versus winter, and a overall plan that encompasses all seasons, making sure that we do have our input, but at the same time, we do want them to be innovative when they look at what we're asking for. And let's see, provide phased asset development for implementation in the plan. Maybe underneath that, we should say something to the effect of potentially having community engagement. I don't know, some sort of something down at Kendall. So that way we don't leave out the voices that were the strongest and the most opposed to what was happening during the other meetings. And so that way we return this back to the community so we can really listen to what they have to say. And I said this before, we have a lot of new community members, so some of the ideas might have changed slightly. And I really think this is a good way to start moving forward. Now, do we need to specifically call these things out? Or after we start this with a firm, do we make what Sally's speaking about a little bit more of a contractual item, asking for this? Don't know. Just a thought. That's where I'm at.
Jordan?
I think the,
I was just gonna try and play catch up a little bit, and make sure I was with everyone else on this, but to me it feels like a reaction to the previous Kendall plan of having like absolute parameters of like the Kendall plan to me had like A to Z if we're using our letters, where Z would be like the maximum biggest thing we could possibly do, and we want to like not have those absolute large parameters that we had in that. Where I like the ABC idea of, it seems like it's on our end to come up with plan A, B, and C and give it to somebody, and then they work within those parameters of A, B, and C, and then give us back, you know, these are your parameters for A, these are your parameters for B, these are your parameters for C, and that's what's feasible for each of those options. That's kind of what I got from Todd. I don't know if I'm on the same page as all you.
Yeah, so I'm just going to chime in here. One thing that I did give direction on is that between staff, we weren't going to decide on what assets to include in this, to kind of keep that portion more open. And I think that's kind of where we're struggling now too, because we kept it so open that now we're like, well, what assets? Had we said an RFS with, we want the following, you know, improved skating or skate rink, we want
Wedding
venue, you know,
Yeah.
we want return on investments. Like if we framed it that way, we felt like we were doing a disservice to you all because we wanted it to come from you. So if you do tell us that you wanted to say ice rink in there, or you wanted to say a venue in there, like we can absolutely add that. We just didn't feel like it was our place to put that in there initially.
I see what Todd's saying too about, you know, letting the organization kind of do their homework and look at the documents that we provide and kind of take an audit of what they see here and be free to be creative and respond with something perhaps innovative. It seems like a little bit of a balance between what we know to be true, what we have a large body of work and community input already. And so how to keep that relevant and not just throwing everything out and starting completely again, but also not letting that drag us down and impede creativity and, you know, letting the community and the new community and how everybody else is feeling right now in this current time be able to weigh in. And I think that's where I'm struggling a little bit, is just in the balance of the things that we already know to be true and not wasting time rehashing that and getting there again with, you know, making sure that that's still true and still the direction that the community wants to head. And I think that's why I came to the ABC idea, is like, that seemed like a way to integrate what we know and what we've gotten feedback on, and also allow for some new ideas and some new mixing in. And just to acknowledge that that's something that we want this organization to be able to do, is to balance those potentially harmonious, you know, pieces of information.
Todd?
yeah, so I think I can, I think I've got an understanding of what we're kind of discussing here. And when I went to write this draft, what I was struggling with was I didn't really have clear direction. If we were looking for someone to come in and facilitate a community process, who's almost more like a discussion moderator and someone who is doing more visioning, or if what we're really looking for is someone to come in and use our existing master plans or our 3 adopted documents and operate inside of those boundaries
Right.
and come up with something that's a little more tangible in terms of it being more, not a construction document, but a construction rendering.
Yeah.
As far as spatial, like if we know the assets, what we're
Right.
really looking for is a spatial arrangement, and we're looking for scope and scale and a rendering of maybe like a small outdoor ice rink, a moderate
Yes.
roofed outdoor ice rink, and a full-blown ice rink. And we
Yes.
choose from those A, B, and C.
Yes.
And I think if that's what we're trying, there may be a firm out there that can do that, but that's a pretty broad skill set. You're almost asking a construction designer or
Yeah.
a construction rendering firm to come in and facilitate community meetings and facilitate a visioning process. So I think that was where the strategy came,
Totally.
where we said, okay, we have these adopted documents that have been approved by the board. Can we find a way to operate inside of those parameters, and still provide ample opportunity for the trustees and the community to weigh in, but leaning more heavily on those documents that we know have already been accepted by the board and
That's
that the community has had a lot of opportunity to weigh in.
Yes, that's it, Todd.
And that firm may exist out there, but I think typically what you'll find is you'll get someone who can do construction renderings or someone who can facilitate a process. I'm sure there's someone out there who can do both, but I think we may need to pick which lane we the trustees and the citizens would like to be in.
So I see the goal of this entire, of all these work sessions and of the grant money that we have to spend being a master plan for Kendall. So with that in mind, I think I would like to pursue, because I think there's a really large amount of visioning that's already been done and a bulk of work that supports it. I would like to create a document here that really moves us in the direction of renderings and conceptual design more than an organization that takes us through a visioning process.
Then the town needs to do it, whatever it needs to happen, because the community did feel very put out. I listened to a lot of those meetings, the ones that were made public and the ones where the public comment came in. So we can't forget that this is for the people who live here. And it's not just what we want, it's what our constituents that put us into these positions want. So Todd, you had suggested before that maybe we do some sort of mailing from the town of Silverton and get it into everybody's PO box that has some very specific questions. So maybe we shouldn't put that onto the firm. We should put that on to ourselves and our staff in order to have a little bit more of a comprehensive, I don't know, a little bit more of a comprehensive thought into this going forward. I like that idea, Todd. I think it's great. I'd like to see that implemented if the whole board is in agreement. I think that's really good direction for staff to go. And I do understand what you're saying, Sally, but at the same time, the documents that were created by the Kendall Mountain Master Planning Committee, if they're linked in there, which is kind of what I was getting to, not necessarily what the RFP was, but some of the work that's already been done. If they're in there, somebody's going to be able to read them and understand the work that's already put in behind this. And then if we do our due diligence and come back with a little bit more community involvement with that mailing, I think we've got a better scope for us to lead that discussion with.
Great.
Just for clarity, Molly, are you talking about doing those the mailing first and then getting the feedback and then going for the RFS?
I don't know the order that should go in, maybe doing it concurrently. So
Okay.
that way, staff can compile this and present it to the board as well as, the firm. It's not necessary for the firm to have at this point in time. Is it? Because it's not listed in our, in our vagueness, let's put it that way. So by reading these other documents, is that not a way for them to kind of be innovative for us at the same time? Don't know. Just thought.
And just so that we're clear on like the timing of everything, it takes about 20, or we say we'll release an RFP for at least 21 days. So that goes with an RFS as well. So releasing that for 21 days. If we were to release it, January, then get someone online mid-February, and then we'd be able to meet our grant deadline in March. So just kind of keeping that in mind as we move forward with this. I definitely don't want to cut any corners on like engagement processes, but I do want to point out the timeline there.
Molly?
I guess the engagement is not necessarily about adding something new. Those have already all been very clearly laid out in the RNPP and then the Animas River Corridor project. It already all exists. It's the size and scope, I guess, is what we're looking at from the community.
Great.
Todd?
It would be my recommendation that we can run that process in tandem with an RFS. And the RFS, and we could just come up with a really simple questionnaire. It could be based on the detail in the 3 plans that are provided. A lot of the assets that we hear a lot about are in there. So we could even just have a pretty comprehensive list of every asset listed in those 3 plans. Ask the community to start prioritizing and have a write-in section as well. Compile those results. I guess the main question I would have is, how do we get something out there like that without missing anybody? If we do it to register voters, we're missing some residents. If we do it by water bill, we're missing some people who don't get their own water bill. So would we like to kind of make those available to water bills and walk-ins, or?
PO box holder?
Mhm.
Because PO box holder, I mean, you could, you're going to hit families with that. If you're hitting one PO box, that's one family, you're going to hit, and then you can, I'm hoping the public is listening and they would sit around their kitchen table or at dinner time and say, hey, kids, what do you think would be great at Kindle? And actually have a discussion as far as the family unit. We could also have them available for anybody to walk into town hall and pick up if they felt that they needed more copies, or other, more adults into their families and so on. But I think it's a wonderful idea without having to go to too much expense. I think you can get, I don't know, the 4th of July Association, we got mailings done for like $120 to every PO box holder when we stick those things in for donations. So just saying, it's not that expensive to have it done, and you just go to the post office and talk to the guy and he'll help you figure it out.
So
but
the board,
that's an easy way to get to everyone.
Can we pause for a minute? I think we're going in the wrong direction. I guess I don't care too much about being popular, but community engagement is important and necessary throughout the process. I think this particular idea is not moving us forward at all. I think that this idea of a mailing concurrent before or after this RFS is just going to muddy the waters even further. I think we have a really great idea presented by staff of multiple adopted plans that overlap on certain relatively small ideas for development at Kendall, and that we should pursue those in this RFS, and that throughout the actual process of developing the plan, there will be lots of community engagement where, like Todd was saying, they'll present first a conceptual idea that they will get feedback on from us in the community. Then they'll present visual conceptual ideas that they'll get feedback from us and the community. And then they'll present like a final draft that they'll get feedback from us in the community. I think that if we go back to opening this all the way up to like, what are the top 4 priorities of skating rink, venue, skiing, mountain bike trails, and other stuff like that, we're just diving right back into the stuff that we've already gotten hundreds of responses on over the last 12 years. And I just think it's a lot of busy work that muddies the process. And I think we should just focus on finding someone who can aggregate these already adopted plans with a lot of already existing community input and present us with ideas that then we can engage with the community on. Because I think one of the failures of the process on Kendall so far is having this kind of blank slate idea. And so everybody's arguing about stuff without actually knowing what they're arguing about. Like, let's give us something specific to argue about instead of continuing to argue about general things. So I think this idea of a mailing at this stage is really unnecessary, but that there will be a time for it very soon.
I don't care when it happens. I just know that the community was outraged before. And this is not being popular. This is about doing the right thing for everybody who put us into these positions. It's about their voices. So I don't care what stage it comes in, but I like Todd's idea. He came up with that last time we met about this. And I'm just trying to create something that causes engagement without having to have people coalesce, especially in the age of COVID.
I don't think there's a huge amount of outrage. Certainly there are people who are outraged, but there's a huge amount of support for looking at Kendall and being visionaries about it, and creating a master plan for Kendall has a lot of support. And I think the engagement piece comes when that, I hate to sound like a broken record, to go back to the ABC idea, but to keep people's engagement focused and on the topic of something that's potentially really happening versus a fear of something that could happen. I think the engagement piece happens on the renderings, on what
Even
the,
before that, it's we need to,
and it's been done.
well, no, like, I'm still confused.
So
Yeah,
are you saying that like, we need to prioritize, we need to have this group or, you know, whoever comes in and they help us prioritize these in the already adopted plan, these assets, and then we move forward with the renderings and then, okay, no.
no, I think that's the problem and has been with a lot of the things around Kendall's. I don't think we're all talking about the same thing.
Totally.
So
Let's talk
I will
about
try
the
to
same
really
thing.
quickly describe what I think the process is, and maybe I'm totally wrong and I'm the one that's not here. So what I imagine happening is if we agree to something like this request for services with some, wordsmithing in here, we will then get to interview a handful of applicants that come back to us that have different levels of construction, development, and design experience that relate to all different forms of recreation and infrastructure. Hopefully we find someone who has very specific experience to like high altitude, harsh environment development. And we pick one that seems like a good fit, that understands what our community characteristics are and the goals of our community. Once we hire them, then there probably will be some type of community meet and greet where they get additional input of saying like, we just want to hear from the community what's most important, kind of like Community Builders has been doing. Though that's not so much of like facilitating all the visioning that Community Builders has been doing. They're just going to try and get a sense of the pulse here. Then they're going to present to us some type of written document that probably doesn't really have any pictures of like what scope they have in mind based on all of the research that they've done and like meetings they've had with staff. We'll have an opportunity to provide feedback on that document.
Yep.
Following that, if things are still going well, we'll probably see some type of larger packet that includes layouts and like rough ideas of what different amenities might be there or improvements to existing amenities with a visualization. And then after that, we'll get some type of master plan. Like that is what I envision this leading to, but I don't know if that's what everybody else thought of as well. And if that's the case, I feel like there's so many opportunities for us to, as a community, not just us as the board, redirect the process if there's something that really irks some portion of the community or is missed that we think is important. And I think
That's what I mean. Yeah, I think that's a perfect description of the process. That's how I'm envisioning it. And I think that's what I mean by, I think there's a huge amount of public support for that process.
Right, cool, cool. And so if that's the case and all of those steps still are ahead of us, the first part is just getting to the starting line of, is there a good resource out there that can take our money to help us create some vision for the things that the community has already said they wanted over the last 10, 12 years.
And how can this document reflect that hope and desire on the part of our community so that we put our best foot forward in order to get the best responses that will match that vision? That's what we have to do tonight.
Cool.
Okay.
Do we feel like we're on? Jess, yes.
Todd or Gloria, can either one of you explain to me exactly how accomplishing the goals of deferred maintenance and getting the issues that we have at Kendall currently fixed? I mean, all this planning stuff is great, but we have thousands of planning documents sitting on the shelf right now. We have needs that need to be done. They need to be done last year, and so how are we going to accomplish these deferred maintenance issues that we're seeing, such as the frozen pipes and stuff like that?
Sure, I'll take that one. So one thing that I am working on with our staff for next year is capital improvement plans. And it's like a CIP, we say it's CIP, so a capital improvement program for each of these so that we can plan out the maintenance of our assets. If you think about kind of financially and how you spend money, and you think about the community that you have right now and where the money is coming from right now and the assets you have right now, that's when you spend the money that you have in the bank on those assets. So that's taking care of deferred maintenance, taking care of maintaining buildings, because the community right now is able to utilize that. When you think about planning for that future, you're thinking about the future community, and you don't really want to use your right now assets for that future community. Thinking about if you are going to build a new building or a new ice rink or something like that, that's kind of where you think about finding money for future use. So did I make that?
Is this not a matching grant? Or is this a matching grant?
One of the grants, the DOLA grant, is matching, and I think it's 6,000.
Okay, so I've been on the board for almost 6 years now, and I've seen us throw these matching grants, money at these matching grants for these plans that never really get implemented. So, I want to bring up the point that if we have money now and we have issues that need to be fixed, are we not better off using that money right now to get that stuff fixed, to make sure that the assets that we have right now are able to withstand the next 3 to 5 years, as opposed to throwing this money towards another planning grant where we have something it looks great on paper, but is it ever going to be able to be implemented?
I'm not going to argue that we have a lot of plans.
And I think that's a very fair perspective.
Yeah, I'm not, yeah.
I also think sometimes the best way to deal with broken things is to invest in making them more self-sustaining. Every time we spend money on fixing something broken at Kendall, we're pulling money from something else. And if we could find something that aligned with the community vision that does improve Kendall and increases the revenue at Kendall, like how Moelis produces revenue, then we can much more sustainably maintain our issues. But that's, I mean, that's 50-50 here. Like, I think, we could debate all day whether, taking a more conservative approach and just spending the money on existing issues or investing in those things to hope that we get there. Like, probably half the community is going to feel one way and half the other. So I don't know.
I think, in my opinion, you're talking about a big budget versus a small budget kind of issue. And right now we're working with a small budget, and I'm just tired of seeing this facility kind of go to pot. I really would like to see us use money that we have right now to make improvements that we're going to see tomorrow. And that's just my opinion. And I may be the only one who thinks that way, but as somebody who's worked to get stuff done with relatively little resources, I think it's something worth thinking about.
Thank you. I agree. Molly?
You're right on the money, Jess. But to compare it to Moelis is not even close. We've owned Moelis since what, 1929? And only in the last few years has it really become a profitable enterprise. That's apples and oranges, not even. But I completely understand exactly where Jess is coming from, because if you look at the scope of what we say that needs to be done, why, if we have the capital, why haven't we done it? Why is that not something that's on our list right now? Why are we not looking at whatever we can do to not make the pipes freeze? I mean, we're going to go round and round on these discussions because these are both right. The planning for the future is right, and the immediate need is right. So I think 6,000 in comparison is minimal for a matching grant. I agree that we need to prioritize the work that's already listed out on here. And then, oh, come on, I swear to, I hate Google Docs. It closed again on me. So they're both right. And yes, I agree 100% with your process and the way you laid it out, Shane. I think we got a little all muddied in the water with these different directions that Sally was taking everything on. And that is the process that as I understood it as well. So I think us coming to a consensus, utilizing the planning grant, but we have to make it an actionable item. We have to make sure that we figure out that maybe that's the number one priority, is to figure out how to reroute the water or whatever we have to do in order to make it not freeze. Let's figure that one out. Maybe that's the priority. And that's the way we can incorporate both of these things, where we need, where the need is there and we need to fix what we have so we don't let all of our assets become worthless and falling apart. And we plan for the future at the same time. So I don't know if we can put all of that into this document. Oh, come on, would this thing just open up again? There it goes.
And I don't want to discount the work that Todd's done over the years. I think the improvements that we've made over the past couple of years have been tremendous. But I'm just weary at throwing away money at these matching planning grants, seeing that we've been through it time and time again, and with relatively little results to show for it.
I guess
So I
that's
really like the, oh, go ahead.
that's the point. How do we make it actionable? How do we make what comes out of these planning grants immediate need and actionable items, and then a section of it be more for the future?
I have the benefit of limited context and unreasonable optimism. And I've seen us do some pretty ridiculous stuff in the last 18 months that seemed impossible 22 months ago. And maybe I'm totally wrong, but I think that if we do approach these with, like Molly said, a more moderate goal that we can execute. Like I'm so excited about what we're doing at Columbine Park, and even the deck renderings that Todd's working on. And it seems like we're just checking boxes left and right lately. And hopefully we can keep that going with this. So I don't feel like the development of a plan for Kendall improvements is like a wish list 10 year from now item. It seems like something kind of similar to the affordable housing project that our goal is to break ground this calendar year. But if we set aggressive goals that we also make sure are relatively reasonable, I think we might actually, utilize these funds very well.
And in this case, I think the ratio of matching money to what we receive in return for the grant funding for the planning, that ratio is really strong in our favor. So it's not nearly as much in the matching funds as it is in the bulk of the grant funding. And so I think the conservative approach is really important so that we maintain what we have. And in this particular case, I think it makes sense to leverage the matching funds to create a realistic plan that is visionary and realistic at the same time. Obviously, if like a carousel shows up over at Kendall, we will have not done our jobs. That will be bad.
People love carousels.
That was actually what my daughter put in the visioning session in the original round. She was a kindergartner.
Jim and Jordan, I'm curious to hear, more thoughts from you.
I'll go first. A lot of things have been said. A lot of ideas have been thrown out. I think we've got a fantastic plan here. We need to be realistic. I like being the eternal optimist, but I think in this instance, realism should be taking effect. We need to look at this and say, what are shovel-ready projects? What can we do now? I haven't really heard a lot about that, but I also know that we're looking to the future and visioning. I'm also for a hands-off approach with regards to staff. I think staff knows what they're doing. We've been provided with a 10-page packet. It's very good. And if we provided this and submitted this out there for people to review, I think they give us their feedback. That's what we're supposed to be doing, is getting the feedback from the town, from the public, from our friends and neighbors. And there's not really that Q&A session, obviously, in a work session. But more importantly, by submitting something, we'll get the feedback from potential planners that will tell us, hey, this can be done, this can't be done. This is how much square footage you got, so this is what we're thinking here. I mean, we can come up with pie in the sky ideas all we want, and we can have things drawn out, but at the end of the day, we should probably leave it to the professionals to do that. So, yeah, I got plenty of thoughts and feelings, but I think we have a good roadmap already in place. And we should let our staff run with it and see what they come up with. That's me.
Awesome. That gave me a couple of thoughts, but let's hear from Jordan.
Yeah, no, I like all the discussion we've been having so far, and I like the layout of the process of going along. I'm on board with that, and I feel like, the packet details everything really well, and I think as long as we have a plan to address the deferred maintenance as well in the future, I think we can go ahead and not shoot for the moon, but shoot for a project that we can accomplish. I think we have some good momentum moving forward to do that, and a lot of community support behind it.
Awesome. So the thought I had was more process oriented, but I completely agree with what Jim said. Is there a way to facilitate getting this version of this RFS in the newspaper this week and anticipating an extended public comment period at the beginning of our meeting on Monday and asking for input limited to the scope of this RFS, so that we could take direction from the public and then adopt it potentially at this coming meeting?
Yes,
So that they have an
I
opportunity.
love that
for
idea.
input, and then
That's a great idea.
we can, if someone has like a groundbreaking addition or even just an iterative addition, we could say, yes, we like that. Please go ahead. And then we authorize a subject to that addition.
Yeah, that's definitely possible.
Yeah, and if those can just be kind of, before they're integrated into a new document, if we can kind of pull those separately, just to come see what we're looking at in original form and redline it type of. Just to not integrate all of, I love the idea for feedback. I've already moved on. Feedback from the public and
What do you
then,
mean? Oh, you mean like the feedback we gave tonight to see a red line of?
no, from the public. I really like this idea of the public input.
So, yeah, so I think what Shane's saying is they would come and present it to you, like, I wouldn't just take the.
And integrate it. Okay,
Integrate it. It
Got
would
it.
be presented to you all to change.
It's like
Okay,
the
my
opportunity we had
confusion.
tonight to comment on it.
Yeah,
The public
yeah.
will have that on Monday.
yeah, great.
And then we can look at and then we can discuss as trustees an aggregate of tonight's discussion plus the public's input on
Okay.
Monday and either adopt it or ask for further revisions on
Nice.
Monday.
That makes sense.
Cool.
I hadn't,
And also acknowledging, Jess's point that if we have $6,000, is this the best application of that $6,000? And just making sure that we give that sufficient discussion as well.
when we spend $6,000, we can in return also get $40,000 towards planning.
Correct, but still acknowledge, like, giving consideration to
Yeah,
the fact
that
that we
we
have
have-
$6,000 that we're choosing to spend now. This isn't just a free 50. And,
Totally.
like, is there something else that should get this $6,000 that's a higher priority than this plan?
Okay,
And just like make sure that we have that conversation too.
yeah. Another thought I had on these bullet points, Todd, is I just wonder I'm wondering about the BLM and the 92 acres, and I know that we anticipate that being conveyed to us, but in the meantime, is there anything that needs to align to the BLM's requirements when we look at master planning at Kendall?
It just needs to be in accordance with the BLM approved plan of development, to my knowledge.
Okay. Cool, thanks. And yeah, just kind of made me think about this is there something in here where there might be a recommendation for funding? Like if you wanted to do this, wait, did I miss it? Sorry, it's a bullet point. Oh, help identify funding opportunities. Thanks.
We did all get a copy of the planning guidelines. I'd like to note that it's very ski area centric. I think there's some community vision bullets in here that look like a lot of time went into the wordsmithing of them that describe like community characteristics that are important more generally, but I think a large portion of the document is very specific and may send us in the wrong direction.
Fair enough.
But that it could be.
Can we pull portions of it that aren't so ski area specific?
Sure. I mean, I think it's an interesting thing for somebody to look at to see what was prepared in the past, as long as they're given the context of what happened in that process. And like I said, I think that there's aspects of this that are not specific to a ski area that it looks like a lot of time went into. But overall, this is a very like ski area development document.
I'd like to reserve judgment till I've read the whole thing. I just realized we did just get it.
And that was the latest one I could find in Lisa's files.
I think the latest one is in a packet.
Oh, okay.
I think it's something we'd have to look back.
Like to the board?
Yep.
Okay.
And then my only other thought on that document, that we're reviewing tonight, the request for services, is if the title of the document, currently it says request for services, Kendall Mountain Recreation Area Planning. Do we want to call that master planning, or do we want to keep it more general planning? Or what's the difference between recreation area planning and master planning?
And then we had steered away from the word master plan, even though we do have master plans in other areas, like Mullis has a master plan. Anavis River Corridor has a master plan. The town as a whole is updating their master plan. So in this one, after our first Kendall meeting talking about the master plan, there was a little confusion with the community on, well, we're already involved in the Compass project and what's
Okay.
going on with this master plan. And I wanted to be really intentional that, yes, this is a master plan, but I didn't want to confuse people. But I'm happy to go back to calling it Kendall Mary Recreation Area Master Plan, if that is the direction that you all want to take. I just didn't want to create any more confusion around that after the feedback I got from the last Kendall committee and trustee meeting.
Right, confusion for the community. I guess I'm just wondering if it creates potentially confusion for someone responding to the request
That's a fair,
about what we're seeking.
that's a fair point.
I guess I don't really know the difference between like a plan and a master plan. Like
Yeah,
I think a plan's like the plan's more general. So I don't have an issue with it just being general.
I don't have an issue for me. I'm just wondering about, in replying to this request, is there something in the industry that signals to an organization, this is something different than that?
Not that I'm aware of, but it's something to consider. Yeah, I'm trying to think of an incident where we differentiated out a master plan from a plan.
I think there's more potential negative impact by like thinking about like the people who might not be here all the time that just read about it in the newspaper, and then they read about how we just proposed and adopted, a request for something relating to the Kendall master plan, and then just like skipping through, or even like, a Denver newspaper like misprinting this, thinking that it's still related to the thing that we were doing.
Okay,
And I feel like there's more potential negative than potential positive by changing it. Because I think we do want to distinguish this from the process we were doing before.
sure. Okay,
But this is all, there's 7 of us, so that's just my opinion. And like Jim said, I think Todd put a lot more thought into this than any of us can, and this meeting and whatever he came up with, I'm pretty confident was thoughtful.
I'm just going to address this. You're very much right. This planning draft is extremely exactly what we were not trying to do. But Exhibit A and Exhibit B kind of catch a little bit more onto all of what we were actually really trying to incorporate. So we might want to just look at those 2 exhibits rather than the upper part of the document, as if anybody else has looked at this email. Like I said, I haven't read every word for word, but you were 100% right, Shane, with what your comment was a minute ago.
I just think it's up to us to trust the process.
Cool. I guess Todd or Gloria, is there anything you need from us to extract as much value as possible out of this meeting.
Well, we do appreciate this dialogue. I think it was very healthy and everyone was able to kind of get some stuff out as far as their ideas go. I just want to double check that the direction, our direction for staff, did everyone agree on putting the RFS in the newspaper as written now to have a larger discussion on Monday with public feedback? Or, well, I'll just ask that first.
I think if you guys did like Sally's feedback about having something more specific about seasonality that Jim and Molly also seem to agree with, that would, you know, if you'd like to add that, I support that. And
Yeah,
I see
okay.
people nodding. Does that sound good to you, Sally? I'd like
Sure.
that bullet.
Okay.
Or it can go in the paper as is and we can see if the community has the same thought.
So I defer to that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have a,
If there are iterative edits that you feel like you'd like to make before it goes in the newspaper, we
yeah,
support you. I think
that's
that's
it.
fair.
There's a couple grammatical things that I need to change first, but, Todd?
I was just gonna say, I've taken some notes and I could just read off what I would like to change before it were to be published. And if the board were to agree to those, Gloria and I could make those edits and then publish it or send a copy out to the board for a quick review before we get it in the paper. And they were it sounds like we wanted to include A and B of the Kendall KMRA MPC guidelines for planning, reference specific sections in the plans. So that would be the BLM document, the Animas River Corridor Plan. We can almost make a short form packet that would be available to the public referencing just those sections and have that available at town hall as well. Separate ADA out from the section it's currently in. Include a summer and winter or 4 season seasonal breakdown into the deliverables, just so that was separated out. Clarify the check-ins with both the trustees, staff, and the community to imply that the selected contractor would be doing pretty frequent meetings with those 3 entities, or almost even clarify a schedule for that. And that, I think, is everything I've got. Was that too much too fast, or did you guys catch that?
I missed the very first one, the very first change.
Oh, I believe it was included exhibit A and B from the Kendall Master Planning Committee guidelines for planning. I don't have a copy of that in front of me, so I'm not sure what they are, but I had heard.
I don't think we're at a point to just include those verbatim, especially since we think we have a version from 2019. I think that maybe the idea is that along the way, there might be components of the later version of this document that include some really good community characteristics, but I don't know that those should be included in the RFS.
So that would be more of a plan. So that document would be more of a planning resource available to an elected or a selected partner.
I think so.
Okay.
I think that if we were to go down that path, I think it just would take more time and that it isn't necessarily additive to the process at this stage.
Right. So that's more of a additional planning document available to.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay. And I do think it would be helpful if we do that. We could also provide some form of the complete documents, those 3 planning documents, and a short form, maybe like, just the really pertinent information on Kendall planning for the community to have available at town hall.
Awesome.
So with those changes, if we were to draft up the changes that we just discussed, minus the exhibit A and B from the planning guidelines, and then publish that in the newspaper for citizen input at our January 10th meeting.
Unless that's too quick, like, because you need to get that to the newspaper by noon tomorrow, and like even just citing those references might be like, we could aim for the 24th meeting instead, have it in the newspaper the week of the 10th, and then talk about it on the 24th.
That might give us a little bit more time to hash everything out.
Is that okay with everybody? I just realized that like to make the changes Todd just listed off by noon tomorrow sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you guys can
Todd,
out tomorrow,
you can do
cool.
it?
If not, you know.
I think if we email the paper first thing in the morning, they can save us a space, and I don't see any reason we couldn't get that together by noon, but if we were running late, they can usually work with us a little bit if they know something's coming. So for the sake of timeliness and knowing we have some deadlines approaching on this, I'd like to at least try and get it in by noon.
Cool.
I think if staff is confident that they can get it done, then let's let staff roll with it. We might want to take two different public inputs on it, do it on our next meeting, and then do it on our last meeting of the month, just so we make sure we get all the voices heard.
I guess the only thing I would clarify is if Gloria has some sort of availability tomorrow to do a final review. I know I can get my piece done, but I'd like Gloria to have eyes on it as well before it goes in for final submission.
And I just have a 10 o'clock before noon, and you and I have a meeting, and I got another meeting, but I think I can fit it in, yes.
Okay.
And then were you working down the list of just double checking what the next steps were? Because we paused.
To
after
get input on that, and
Yeah.
you had some other things.
Oh, I don't know what I had as a question on. I'm trying to think. All right, let's see. Let me look at
I
my,
think you were just recapping.
okay, yep.
So if you guys get it done by the submission deadline, to put that out, and then to also have in that newspaper thing a note that, you know, we're requesting public feedback
Okay.
at our next meeting.
I'd just like to thank Todd and Gloria for all the hard work that they've done, keeping us moving forward on this, and I have full faith in our staff. So happy to support you guys.
Thank you.
Agreed. Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, this is like the worst comment to say right after Jess's. I completely agree, Jess. I wondered if it makes sense to create some sort of informational, I don't know what the format is for this, a memo or a framing ahead of something that Todd might put in, and this may prevent it from going in the paper tomorrow. Just outlining the process that Shane went through, so people kind of see where we are and where we're headed, or if that's just too much information, or I just wonder if this showing up in the paper, again, like I think the idea is engagement and feedback, and our intentions are all really good. And I just don't want to see it create fear or like, what's the town doing? And if it just plunks into the paper, is it clear enough on its own, or does it need a little bit of framing?
I think we probably, when I was thinking about putting in the paper, I was thinking of putting like a short, kind of what I do with your agenda memos, and like a little background context. Trustees met on work session, asked that we put this in the paper for this. That was kind of kind of the route I was thinking of going with that, if that's okay with everyone.
Do we all agree that the way that this process will work is what Shane outlined earlier?
I mean,
We have
broad
agreement
strokes
on
don't
that?
hold anybody to the exact outline that I provided.
I mean,
was like,
in a broad brushstroke way. I just think that might be helpful for people to know and then be able to anticipate their next opportunity for engagement.
I agree with the reason why you're suggesting that, but I'm trying to think through the best way to accomplish that, and I'm not coming up with anything better than what Todd or Gloria have already done, I guess.
For the paper?
Yeah, like I think about, if we did put anything more that like exactly what you said, and if we did anything more than that, then we're creating like an outline of something that
That may or
bound
may
to.
not happen.
Yeah.
I
As
know.
opposed to saying conceptually, this is what we envision. I think what Gloria's talking about doing sounds great.
I think if we do any more, then we're creating a panic that's not there.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
There are no bad ideas.
I'm good. Just throwing it all out there. We're here. We're doing it.
Anything else? Any other requests from us or closing thoughts?
I think
No,
we
sir.
have our marching orders. Todd, you feel comfortable with this? Cool.
Thanks, Todd. Appreciate that framework for us tonight.
Cool. Everybody else good? Just quick thumbs up. Cool. Thank you, everyone. I thought this was a really helpful discussion. And Todd and Gloria, thanks so much. You keep teeing us up to succeed. So thanks for that. All right. We will now adjourn this work session and we'll see everyone on January 10th at 7 p.m. for a regular meeting. Good night. Happy New Year.
Night.
Happy New Year, everybody. Good night.
Right.